Hello friends, tonight we're going to take a look at the Microtech Combat Troodon, one of the most well-known knives that Microtech makes. The Combat Troodon is very, very popular, very large, very expensive, and very well made. Folks love this knife and they sell as fast as Microtech can make them. You could probably blame that on John Wick too, but I do think there's more to it than that. This is an incredible knife regardless of who wields it in a movie. I've had this one for a while and just now got around to reviewing it because about a month in, this knife fell into my pocket and hasn't left since. How could I review it when I was too busy shoving it down my pants? As you may know, if you're one of the 5 people who watch this awful channel, I'm a big Microtech fan. That's putting it mildly. So no going into this review that this will be a lot of biased show and tell. We're taking a look at my personal carry knife made by my favorite brand. It's hard for me to be objective here, and I probably won't be. All the same, we'll talk about the good and the bad, though this knife is overwhelmingly good, and that's why they sell so goddamn fast. The Combat Troodon is one of Microtech's largest knives, and it's also one of their most treasured models by fans. It's ridiculously big, and that's exactly why we like it. And you all have asked me about this model more than any other by a wide margin. Often overlooked is this knife's smaller brother, the Troodon. It looks exactly the same, it's just scaled down. And now that I've carried it for a few months, I entirely understand your enthusiasm for it. This might be my favorite defensive knife to carry. One of, if not the favorite. Though I still carry my Halo 6 and Cyphers often, this is one of the ones that gets into my pants most often in the morning these days. As for the knife's funny name, it's Greek for wounding tooth. But troodontids are small, two-legged, bitey dinosaurs probably covered in feathers. The first fossils found in the mid-19th century were just serrated teeth, hence the name. We now know that lots of dinosaurs had serrated teeth, but yeah, hey, folks believed all kinds of dumb shit in 1856, like, that slavery should continue. But none of that really matters. All you need to know is that this knife is named for a small, bitey dinosaur with mean little teeth. The Combat Troodon, like most Microtech designs, is kind of part knife, part art object. As much attention has been paid to the aesthetics as to function, and that's what I love about the brand. So if the Cypher kind of has brutalist lines, the Combat Troodon looks like a sort of futuristic Art Deco piece, maybe filtered through the lens of Blade Runner or Clockwork Orange. And that's why we buy Microtechs, because they kind of fulfill our desire to have things that are both the height of the art form and the height of art itself. Microtechs are the best of the modern automated production knives, the opposite of something handmade. Each is precisely machined for insane tolerances and these crazy geometric patterns. I just fucking love it. Features. The Combat Troodon is a very large double-action OTF, or out-the-front knife, meaning that when you push the switch forward, the blade deploys. When you pull it to the rear, the blade retracts back into the handle. This knife is big and fat. The blade is 3.81 inches long, and it's about 4/5 of an inch wide. It's chunky. Look at the thickness of the blade, too. The handle is 5.7 inches long and a little over an inch wide, not accounting for the button. I have oil all over my hands, I apologize. The overall length of the knife with the blade deployed is 9.5 inches. Despite its size, the knife only weighs 5.3 ounces, very light for a knife this size, but heavy for a Microtech. The handle is made of 6061 T6 aluminum, and the blades are either Carpenter 204P, XHP, Bowler M390, or LMAX. My particular example is 204P, which you can see printed on the blade there. And I prefer 204P along with M390 over LMAX and XHP. Whichever steel you get, it's kind of luck of the draw, so make sure you order from a retailer like Southern Edges who will check the steel for you. Though you should also order from Southern Edges because Mike is a great guy with great customer service. 204P is the domestic equivalent of M390, and both steels hold an edge forever. LMAX and XHP aren't too far behind. So, which steel do you want? Well, it depends on what you intend to do with the knife. For a self-defense knife, where you're not using the blade for tool tasks throughout the day, edge retention matters a little bit less. With the knives that I use daily in a workshop setting, edge retention matters a bit more to me. Whenever I mention steels, a few of you absolutely lose your shit over it. It'll be okay, I promise. I'm just presenting my own experiences here, and I'd recommend trying all of these steels to decide for yourself, as I did. I found that LMAX and XHP don't hold an edge as long as M390 and 204P. In a workshop setting, M390 and 204P will hold a shaving edge far longer than you would expect. Sometimes I'll check the edge on such a blade and I'll just be baffled that it'll still shave. Will it shave? It's like you're watching the world's fucking creepiest game show. LMAX holds an edge for a remarkably long time as well, but it's just not going to hold it as long as 204P and M390. So for a working knife, I like M390 and 204P a little bit more. I don't have much interest in the other two steels in a Microtech, especially in a working knife. I don't want them. But Elmax does have some advantages. Folks say it can be less chippy, but more importantly, it's easier to sharpen. So from that perspective, you might prefer Elmax for a working knife, but I don't. With the exception of one Microtech that I use as a camping knife. I really enjoy that one because it can be a bit more easily cared for by me, the user. M390 and 204P, for me, are very hard to sharpen. I've heard from folks who aren't bothered by it, but I certainly am. Maybe it's me, I don't know. These are just my experiences and preferences. But to me, Elmax is substantially easier to deal with, much easier to sharpen. For a defensive knife that's going to be stowed in your pocket and never used except in a defensive emergency, and you should only use your defensive knives for that. You shouldn't be, cutting mail open and shit with them throughout the day. For a defensive knife, the qualities of the steel are less important. All four steels that Microtech uses will be very, very sharp, obviously. But this is just some information to consider. Hopefully you survived the steel discussion. I'm just very, very picky, and I only want a knife if it's in one of my preferred steels. You may be less picky, and that's totally okay. All of these are excellent steels, and no one can really consider any of these bad options. We're talking about subtle differences here. But back to the Combat Troodon. This knife is available in 3 blade shapes: the double edge, which is sort of Microtech's signature thing, a very useful single edge, and an equally useful tanto. All of these blade shapes are available with or without serrations in several blade finishes. My blade is a beautiful satin finish, one of my favorite Microtech finishes, but you can also find it in stone wash, a black finish, sometimes a black DLC even, and the apocalyptic finish. My hardware is the standard silver, but you can find that in black as well, and a few other unique limited edition options, and even blue titanium, which looks great. The handle comes in any color you can think of. That's one of my favorite things about Microtech. These aesthetic options aren't always available, though. They make them when they make them, and if you miss them, you miss them. You have to be checking with dealers regularly to get what you're looking for. Speaking of the handle, it's a bit more contoured than most OTFs. And the machining is really what accounts for the higher price of the standard Troodon and the combat model over something that's kind of similarly sized. Like the Dirac Delta is substantially less, even though it's a similar size. The same thing goes for the Ultratech compared to the standard Troodon. That machining, that adds quite a bit of price. Flipping the knife over, we find a very large spring steel pocket clip. At the bottom of the knife is the standard Microtech glass breaker. All of this is held together with Microtech's proprietary tri-wing hardware that you either love or you hate. These knives are not intended to be user serviceable, and if you've ever looked inside a Microtech OTF, you know the goddamn why. Just leave it to the company to take care of maintenance. So why should you choose a Microtech? On several occasions, I've mentioned why I feel that Microtech OTFs are superior to their competition. The Combat Troodon might illustrate these advantages best of all. The Microtech's most notable competitors are the Benchmade Phaeton, Autocrat, and Infidel, though there are others like the Guardians. Let's mention the Guardians first. They tend to be a bit smaller and are made of great steels, like Elmax. The ones that I've seen lately, in fact, are all Elmax. Elmax might not be my personal favorite steel for a Microtech, but it is still a very premium steel, one of the best for a knife, and the Guardians are cheaper than the Microtechs. However, to my personal taste, the Guardians are so profoundly fucking ugly that I would never buy one or even consider it. I find them repulsive. They look like the knives you would have designed when you were 12, doodling out of boredom in social studies in between designing, I don't know, fucking flame decals for the Batmobile and Optimus Prime or something. The Guardians are OTFs for people who think that the Fast and the Furious movies are good. The Guardians are sort of the knife equivalent of a short sleeve button down with dragons on it, or a knife for people who buy Mandalorian and Punisher themed shoes. Look, they're battle worn, man, for when I go into battle. Against fucking what? The guy from Time Warner coming to turn off your high-speed internet in your mom's basement because you spent all your money on battle-worn bullshit? No, thank you. That's not for me. But other than my own intense personal likes and dislikes, the Guardians are actually really great knives and are an excellent value. Oh, God, I'm such a fucking dick sometimes. I apologize. I hope you all know that all this roasting isn't fun. The Benchmades, on the other hand, though, they are a terrible value. I'm not joking about those. Before you flip your shit again, grab that shit, hold it down, don't let it flip. Don't flip that shit. Just hear me out for a minute. Benchmade makes outstanding knives, some of the best, but they make lousy OTFs for the money. The Benchmade OTFs feel janky. Like they ought to cost 100 to 150 bucks at the most, not 400. The machining on the handles is so basic you feel like you're wielding a club, not an expensive tactical knife. And you're paying about the same as you would for a Microtech, but in the case of the Infidel at least, you're getting a D2 steel and a knife with a very premium price tag. I'd expect a fancier steel for the money. D2 is not a bad steel, but it's not a $400 OTF steel. The Phaeton and Autocrat are at least made of S30VN, which is an awesome steel, but it's still not LMAX or M390 or 204P, is it? Yet the Benchmades are priced as though they have the same premium steels, tight tolerances, and premium machining as the Microtechs. Just get out of here. That's some bullshit. And don't take my word for it. Pick up an Infidel next time you're at the knife store. I'm serious. You'll feel the difference. And yes, we do need to talk about the name Infidel. Obviously chosen to appeal to 3%ers with Spartan stickers all over their shit. These folks are still riding the fucking Piston AR-15 bandwagon from a decade ago and believe that the effing Scar is the finest rifle ever produced. Oh, yes, you're an infidel. I guess you don't like Islam, I guess. It's a fucking stupid name. It feels like a relic of, I don't know, 2003 or 2004 when Islamophobia was at its absolute fucking height. Surely in 2020, we're past the point where we need to name a fucking knife the Infidel. Like if some company made a knife called the Christ Killer, y'all would flip your shit, yet we're okay with a knife called the fucking Infidel. The Benchmade OTFs just aren't good enough to warrant spending $400 or even $300. $200 is pushing it, and $150 feels about right for one made of S30V or D2. I'd be totally happy with that. At $150, I wouldn't be complaining at all. They're great knives at that price, but the use of cheaper steels isn't really why the Benchmades feel cheap. After all, XHP isn't the most premium steel ever. It's really the lack of imagination in the designs, the basic machining, the looser tolerances. If you really don't want a Microtech, look at the Brian Tie Twist Tie. I love those knives. They're super stylish. The action feels great, and they come in several great blade shapes, from a double edge to something more practical like a Tanto or a single edge. The handle design on the twist tie is so fucking cool and remarkably grippy. I like those a lot. The ties tend to be S30V and are priced at about $350, maybe a little bit more for the large one. They beat the pants off the Infidel. And I'm crazy in love with the way Tie grinds the blades. They look so cool and cut great. Also, I realized that I was complaining about S30V and the Infidel, but you're getting all of this extra machining work with the Brian Tie. It is truly a work of art. It is 100% worth $350. So spend your money a bit more wisely and get a Microtech or a Guardian. I guess if you prefer ugly but very high quality stuff, or if you can't see, if you're looking for something beautiful that isn't a Microtech, I would say get a Brian Tie. So why should you choose this particular Microtech? This is tough. Choosing a Microtech is really about picking which size you need. They all have great actions. They're all remarkably durable in my experience. Microtech's other double-action OTFs range from very small, the UTX-70 and Dirac, to very large, like the Combat Troodon and the Cypher. Because you're watching this video, we can assume that you're looking for a larger OTF. But know that you can't go wrong with any Microtech that you choose. Right now, the two large double-action OTFs in Microtech's range are the Combat Troodon and the Dirac Delta. You've heard me mention the Cypher, but that one is out of production right now, much to my disappointment. I can make the choice between the Dirac Delta and the Combat Troodon pretty simple for you. They're comparable in size, though the Combat Troodon is thicker and a hair heavier. The Delta only comes with the double-edged blade. The big difference is button placement. The Delta has a button on the side, while the Combat's is on top. Whichever is most comfortable to you. Oh yeah, and the styling is a bit different. Either way, you're getting a big and awesome knife. Let's compare the standard Dirac just so that you can look at the button. Yeah. It's on the side instead of on top. You can see that's a tiny little knife, isn't it? But it's still really cool and remarkably useful. Now, if you manage to find a Cypher, the choice is a little bit tougher. The Cypher is long and gracile, while the Combat is chunky. Both have the top button. The Cypher, though, is noticeably lighter, and it still has a longer blade. But getting a Combat Troodon is a lot easier. The Cypher is out of production, fewer made. In the long run, I still personally prefer the Cypher, I think, but I wanted something slightly less rare to carry around in my pockets. You can see that my green Cypher is well used, and it's also, like my red one, a single-digit serial number. So the Combat is a safer choice to carry around outside, even if it is heavier. Let's take a look at some other Microtech sizes, though, just for laughs. Here is an Ultratech. A single edge Ultratech, just because, you know, why the hell not? Let's throw a Halo in there, which is probably not going to fit at all in frame. What about a SOCOM? We'll stick one of those in there too. So I'll include some pictures. I can't see what you're seeing. Hopefully I got all this shit in there. We'll throw some photos in though. How has the Combat Troodon performed? Well, like every other Microtech that I've had, it's been excellent. The action is very sturdy and reliable. The steel is awesome, and the aesthetics are outstanding. Holding this knife in your hand, you notice that relative to other OTFs, the handle is very contoured and very comfortable. Kind of locks your grip in there. It sits naturally in the hand. The texture machining in the handle is very deep, very grippy, more so than other Microtechs, which I've certainly never found to be slick. But I really like the way this area here is relieved to allow 1 or 2 fingers to rest there. I feel like I have a very good grip on the knife. You can see that the knife body isn't straight, the sides have some belly, and the edges are rounded and contoured in places. Instead of making the knife feel fat, it fills out your hand and kind of further enhances that feeling that you firmly have control of the knife. This knife is heavy. Of the Microtechs, only the Halo 6 weighs more, and it feels lighter because the weight is distributed over a larger area. For comparison, the Combat Troodon is a heavy, compressed mass of steel and aluminum. Having the glass breaker down there, you could really do some damage with just the handle of the knife. I mean, it's chunky. It's reassuringly hefty. The action is really smooth. With the exception of a proof run knife that I had, every Microtech I've owned was very, very super smooth. I love the way the actions feel, and the Combat Troodon is just as nice. The button requires just the right amount of force to deploy the blade and just the right amount to retract it. The blade deploys very smoothly with a bit of satisfying recoil from the big blade when it moves into position. Oh, excellent. A few of you have said that you don't like that the Microtech buttons require a bit of force. Consider for a moment that you're planning to carry this knife. Maybe you are, but let's say that you are. I think that you'd prefer that it not open in your pocket. In much the same way, I think you'd prefer that the blade not retract during use. You want the knife to offer some resistance. This knife has the usual Microtech safety mechanism where if it hits an object that offers resistance, the blade will stop, but you still don't want it opening in your pants. Speaking of pants, this thing is much easier to carry than you would expect at this size. I had no issue with the size and weight, and I don't really notice it most of the time, but it's there if I need it. The pocket clip helps. It's very deep, and you can get the knife so far down in your pocket that only the glass breaker is really sticking up. If you have reservations about the size, really don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. You can manage to carry it. For me, this knife is only for defense. I don't really see any other use for the double edge. It's not great for tool tasks. You obviously can't get your finger up on there. Though you can still obviously cut shit with it if you need to. It's just not intended to be sort of a workshop knife. But they make the single edge and the Tanto for tool stuff. I really, really like this blade shape for defense, though. It is my absolute favorite. However, if you buy the single edge or Tanto, this knife will stand up to some remarkably hard use. I have a few single-edged Microtech OTFs that I've practically beaten to death. In fact, that single-edge Ultratech that we took a look at, it's been through some hard times and it still looks relatively unused. You'd be surprised what you can do, though, with a knife like this. Is it going to be as sturdy as a folder? No, but I bet it'll get closer than you think. It's never going to be as sturdy as something like, you know, the SOCOM, for instance, but the SOCOM is damn near indestructible. However, these really aren't too far behind. You should look at some of the torture tests online. It'll shock you. I also want to say that if you're worried about the maintenance associated with an OTF, don't worry about it. If you're buying a Microtech, in my experience, they have some of the best customer service in the knife world. OTFs are mechanical devices. They can't work indefinitely without maintenance. At a minimum, the springs break, and Microtech is excellent about getting that shit fixed. Also, this knife came from Southern Edges, and I love that store. Mike's got the best Microtech selection. His shop is local to me, and I have a great time stopping by there just to see what he has. And I know you want me to talk about the John Wick connection, so I will. The Combat Troodon is the knife featured in the second John Wick film, and John uses it in his subway fight with Common. The film is awesome, and the knife is awesome. And to settle it now, as it will inevitably come up in the comments, the first movie features an Ultratech, the second, the Combat Troodon, and the knife in the third film is a Cypher. What would I change about this knife? The knife is great. The only thing that irks me is the steel swapping. I don't really like that. You know, that when you order one of these, you run the risk of getting one of 4 steels that, though excellent, are not necessarily equal. Most retailers will tell you what steel you're getting, but certainly not all. You can ask them to check, but some simply say you'll get one of the 4 or one of the 2 that they might have on hand. That's the reason I like Southern Edges. Might list the steels accurately, and I've dealt with lots of retailers who do not. When you're paying this much for a knife, we expect the most premium steel, whether the performance differences between them are real or perceived. Are these steels better than the ones that you find in, let's say, one of the Benchmades? Yeah, absolutely, but there's no denying that XHP is a bit less premium than something like M390. I can certainly tell a difference in a workshop setting when I'm cutting stuff all the time. For a defensive knife, there's no real difference in performance, but you're paying the same whether you get M390 or XHP, and I just don't like that. I understand that Microtech has production concerns and there are steel availability issues, but I'd rather see no compromise, however small that compromise might be. Final thoughts. The Combat Troodon is big. It's big, well-made, stylish, slick, and classic Microtech. For a defensive knife, I love this size. I had no idea that this would become my primary carry knife, but every morning, back in my pocket it goes. The action is perfect, the handle feels great, but maybe more important than all that, this knife is just fucking cool. I love it, and I love carrying it. It feels like I have something special in my pocket, not just another OTF. Maybe it's because I had to wait so long to get it. Maybe it's because it was in a movie that I like. I don't really know, but there's something to be said for carrying something that you just enjoy. Months later, I still take it out of my pocket just to admire the damn thing. Though I have many Microtechs at this point, I think this might be the coolest. It's not necessarily my favorite. That's probably still the Cypher, but this one is the most enjoyable to simply possess and enjoy as almost an art object. If you have a chance to try one of these, do it. Better yet, buy one if you can. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you soon. Good night.